Andy Ludwig staying at Utah had massive ripple effects across college football. So just back it up. What are we talking about? Back in 2023, Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, ended up leaving for Alabama as part of a trickle-down effect. You had Bill O'Brien leaving, and just there's a lot of things going on in Alabama at the time. So that trickle-down effect almost impacted Utah. Andy Ludwig was out at a hockey game with Marcus Freeman. Like, they flew him out here. That's how serious this was. And I do believe, I'm going to talk about why and what would have happened, but had Andy Ludwig left for Notre Dame, I do believe Utah's and Notre Dame's paths would have changed, Kyle.
Oh, totally. I mean, you bring in a guy like Andy Ludwig in 2023, especially with Marcus Freeman being such a young coach, he's kind of going to be looking for somebody to kind of show him the ropes, show him how to run an offense. And I mean, Ludwig, obviously, he has the pedigree. He did it here at Utah. He had some unbelievable offenses here at Utah, and obviously a big Power 5 program. Somebody like Notre Dame is going to try and come and poach him. I think if the buyout wouldn't have been so large for Notre Dame to buy out Ludwig's contract here at Utah, he would have been the offensive coordinator for Notre Dame. But again, because the buyout was so big, Utah clearly wanted to retain him. They clearly wanted to keep him. And funny enough, 2 years later, or a year and a half later, he ends up stepping down. And you look at it as a what could have been situation.
It's absolutely a what could have been situation. So we talked about the steps a little bit. He ends up staying. So what then happens with Notre Dame? Well, they hire their tight end coach or interim offensive coordinator, and he does fine. He goes off, good year, and then they go off. He goes to be the head coach of choice. So they need a new offensive coordinator again. Who do they end up with? Mike Denbrock. I do believe Andy Ludwig is a good offensive coordinator. For anyone who wants to dispute that, look at the last time he had good quarterback play. That was in 2022. This offense averaged 38 points per game. But I can also say this. He's not Mike Denbrock. Mike Denbrock helped Jaden Daniels win a Heisman, helped Brian Thomas, as well as Malik Neighbors. Like, those guys are monsters in the NFL now. They got their best seasons under Mike Denbrock. Riley Leonard is a good college football quarterback. I think Mike Denbrock maximized him to the max. I do think this offensive line, everything. Mike Denbrock, I do believe, is a better offensive coordinator than Andy Ludwig was. So at first, if we're just looking like, had Andy Ludwig gone to Notre Dame, I think they still would have been successful. They probably still even make the college football playoff this year, and maybe not even that, because if they had lost one more game, because they already had the NIU loss, that might not have happened. So to me, I don't think they make the national championship with Andy Ludwig. I said he does a good job still, but that's still another leap of, hey, he helped get this team to the playoff. Like, that's a massive win, but then beat the likes of a Penn State defense and things of that nature. Like, I really like Andy Ludwig. He did good things at Utah, beating the top of he didn't beat Penn State a couple years ago. Like, even he had the exact opponent that we saw Denbrock be able to get over the hump again. So I don't feel like Notre Dame, so would have been good. Still would have been in the college football playoff to me, but I don't see them going all the way with Ludwig, because I do think Denbrock is one of the best, if not the best offensive coordinator maybe in college football right now. Right, Kyle?
I mean, yeah, Ludwig's offense, it would have been really interesting to see how it would have adapted to playing against some different defenses. Clearly, with the Pac-12, he kind of knew what he had year to year. And then you saw it this year in the Big 12. It was very different, and he wasn't really able to adapt to it. So you just never know. College football is such a crazy landscape. You don't ever really know year to year. But if you look at a guy like Riley Leonard, he kind of has similarities to Cam Rising in a way. He's a bigger body. He's a very mobile quarterback. He excels in play action. And I feel like Andy Ludwig could have taken a guy like that and really kind of gotten to the core of him and maybe even made him a better player than he was this year. Obviously, Denbrock, we know what he can do. But I think that Riley Leonard and Andy Ludwig would have meshed very well, just with the play style that he has. And I think Notre Dame would have been a really good fit for Ludwig. Who knows what his career looks like today if he does take that job. But again, Mike Denbrock, I think personally, he has that Midwest culture. He went to GVSU, which is where Brian Kelly originally coached. He's got the Brian Kelly connection. He's got the Midwest connection. He's coached at Notre Dame before. I think, the writing was in the stars with him. I think he was a perfect fit for that group. I don't think Andy Ludwig necessarily would have been bad, but like you said, do they make it to the national championship? I don't know. I think they were definitely a college football team, just with that college football playoff team, especially with that roster. But again, to get to the national championship, that's a whole different story.
It's a whole different story. It's incredibly tough. It also just takes the stars aligning the right way, like you mentioned, too, Kyle, and they did for Notre Dame. So for Utah, then, how does this change if Ludwig leaves in 23? I'd love to say that Utah's offense is amazing. It's awesome. They go on to win the Pac-12, and then they go on to win the Big 12 right away. But it's just simply not true. Because guess what? We can change the what if of Andy Ludwig. We can't change the what if of Cam Rising. And Cam Rising still gets hurt. Utah bets on Cam Rising both year. No matter what the new offensive coordinator that Utah would have hired wanted to do when Andy Ludwig left, they obviously still would have rode into Cam that year. They thought he was going to play. And then the year after, I just can't see like the new offensive coordinator be like, no, we're going to move on from Cam. Or even if he wanted to and be like, let's go in a different direction, Witt would have said, no, Cam's our guy. We've reached these two heights with him. Like, you just got to, this is how we're going to do things. And I still feel like we would have been very similar results. Now, could the offensive coordinator come in, been better at developing quarterbacks? Because that ended up being Andy Ludwig's weakness. He had a lot of success with Tyler Huntley, but Utah did not really develop quarterbacks very well with Ludwig. And obviously that ended up occurring where you have to thrust an Isaac Wilson in the starting lineup, and he is just not ready at all. So that became a bad situation. So no matter who the offensive coordinator hire I mentioned like things would have changed drastically if Ludwig was hired. They would have for Notre Dame, probably not for Utah. And even if there was better quarterback play, right, like this last year, they'd win a few more games, but I don't think even better quarterback play, you were never going to get to the level of a Cam Rising that we thought he could be. So I don't see Utah's past 2 years drastically changing if Ludwig was out of the equation earlier, Kyle.
No, I mean, I think what has it been? 6 different starting quarterbacks over the last 2 years, maybe even more than that. That's not a successful game plan for any offensive coordinator. You could have brought in the best offensive coordinator in the country. I don't see how you can continually have rotating quarterbacks. It changes personnel. It just changes so much. Every quarterback's different. We saw Isaac Wilson wasn't Cam Rising, but we wanted him to be, and that just didn't end up working. I mean, Andy Ludwig did not have a very productive year this year, but then again, if you look at the quarterback situation and you just look at top to bottom this roster offensively, especially, it was never going to be a Big 12 championship, go to the college football playoff year. It's really, really tough to do that in general. And when you have a freshman 18-year-old quarterback starting, it's really, really tough. So obviously Andy Ludwig from day one had to figure out a way to get past the Cam Rising stage of Utah football. I'm sure they knew early on that he wasn't going to be available. Or actually, I take that back. Sorry. Going into I think it was week 4. Sorry, I forgot Cam Rising. His injury history is just now so clouded in my brain.
I think it's clouded in everyone's brains, and we all get PTSD when we talk about Cam injuries. You're not alone, my friend.
Seriously. But anyways, I mean, thrusting Isaac Wilson in the starting lineup again, and then you've got guys like Luke Batari, and you guys got like Brandon Rose who are starting games. It just never really that was never going to work out for Utah's offense. But then again, Andy Ludwig, like you said, could he have done a better job developing Isaac Wilson? Could he have done a better job getting a guy like Brandon Rose ready to go? Who knows? Again, it's college football. You never know. But I think that if you bring in a new offensive coordinator, if Andy Ludwig leaves to Notre Dame, you might be able to bring in a younger mind who is a little bit better at molding these talented players and these athletes. So again, who knows? But I like to think about hypotheticals. I think it's a really interesting hypothetical too, especially considering the success that Notre Dame had this year.
When, hey, maybe if Utah just starts Luke Batari both years, maybe they go on a run, right? Since he ended up, he win their 2 final, each of the last 2 years, they've won their final game they played with Batari. So maybe the Batari Ferrari would have just been the key to it all, right, Kyle?
Exactly.
You never know in this crazy world of college football. Honestly, it could have worked. I mean, heck, Brandon Rose, we learned, should have been the guy over Isaac. It sounds like Isaac was practicing better than Rose, so that's why he won it. But some guys are gamers, some aren't. That's the quarterback is the one position, right? Where like you can't get hit in practice. So it's you always know that in the back of your head, even when you're trying to simulate your live reps. And Rose is obviously better at that. And now with Rose, all the best at UMass, Kyle. Am I remember that?
I think you're right there. Yep, I think you're right there.
I think so too. And then hey, Nate Johnson's back. So it just shows you how wild and crazy all the college football things have been. So yeah, 2 disappointing years in a row for Utah, and wild to think what could have been had Andy Ludwig gone to Notre Dame. That's going to do it for our show. We'll be back next week talking the latest in Utah football, Utah recruiting, Utes to the NFL draft, all of it at Locked On Utes. We hope you have a great weekend, everyone.